Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am calling to order the Thursday, July 23rd meeting of the School Building Committee. First, I will do a roll call attendance. Ken Aries.
Here.
Brian Baer.
Here.
Allison is not joining us. Chris Coleman. Chris?
Here. Sorry. I'm here.
Oh, there he is. Okay. Sarah Cronin.
Here.
John Cummings.
Here.
Charlie Donahue.
Here.
Sam Duke.
Here.
Abby's not joining us. Nancy Hyde.
Here.
Lemma is not joining us. Josepha.
Here.
Carol Lewis.
Here.
Michelle Miller. I saw her.
Yep, here.
Oh, there she is. Okay, great. Tony Mullen.
Here.
Emily is not joining us. Amanda Phillips.
Here.
Kate Scales.
Here.
And Maya Plotkin is here. Great. I would like to recognize the live stream to provide real-time public access to the activities of the School Building Committee, which is available online. The meeting is also being recorded for later broadcast on Westwood Media Center platforms. And as always, we thank Westwood Media Center for their invaluable service to us. I also want to recognize Allison, Abby, Lemma, and Emily are not here. Ken and Sarah are, and I just want to give a shout out to the district administration and everybody in the district, the faculty. It has been an unbelievable summer trying to get this fall reopening plan for the schools back up and running, which is why some of them aren't here today. We appreciate the people that are. The amount of work that's going into this is astronomical to me. I don't know how it's happening so quickly the way it is. And I just want to give a huge shout out to them because they are all working overtime times 3. So thank you for Sarah and Ken, since you're on the phone, and everybody else for all you guys are doing. It's unbelievable.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, so overall project update. So we are now sort of heading towards schematic design. In terms of the MSBA next steps, we have a meeting with them called the Facility Assessment Service. What's the S for? Anyone?
Subcommittee.
What's it called?
Subcommittee.
Oh, subcommittee.
Yeah.
The Facility Assessment Subcommittee, we have a meeting with them on August 5th. Where they are going to look at our design and sort of ask a number of questions, and we'll kind of get a good sense from them what they think of the design, what they think some challenges might be. And so that will be a great sort of stepping off point for schematic design, which is really starting to occur now, but will move into earnest in the rest of the summer and into the fall. The architects and Compass have also started scheduling working sessions with certain members of the faculty and staff, because we need to add more to their plate right now. And those sessions are starting, and those I think are going to be really informative for the schematic design phase as well. And so that's where we are. We're going to kind of move forward into the fall. We're going to get into more community forums as the design progresses. We're going to start reaching out to residents again to ask for input. But for now, we're really sort of working on the faculty staff piece, the MSBA piece, and that's where we are in terms of the process. Did I miss anything, or does anyone have any questions? Nope. Okay, great. So into discussion items. The main point of today is to talk about sustainable design and specifically timber framing. The Sustainability Subcommittee met a couple weeks ago and went through this issue and has a recommendation in terms of timber framing for this project. And so we can give you an update on what the Sustainability Committee thought. And to do that, we're going to have Rob take over and give us a presentation on timber framing. Take it away, Rob.
Okay. Okay. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. So, as Maya mentioned, we are about to set sail on our next phase of our voyage.
Oh, corny, Rob. Corny.
I'm sorry, it comes from my dad. I can't help it. As Maya mentioned, we are about to begin the schematic design phase. We'll be reviewing sustainability subcommittee discussion and recommendation, and then quickly go over just next steps, a couple items. So just to provide an overview of the look ahead of our voyage ahead, we've got July and August. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be having a driller on site doing a geothermal test well. Notices have gone out to the neighbors to notify them. We'll have an exact date within the next couple days. We have an education as play session planned for the 30th with a number of educators from the school district. And we have, and as part of that, we reached out to Boston Children's Museum to get some guidance and input and feedback from them as well, which is really exciting. We will have a couple days of sessions with faculty on educator input on room needs. We're beginning our 3D model. We've begun our life cycle cost analysis with our engineer. We've got basically all the information that they need. We've got a confirmed occupancy schedule with the school district just to make sure we've got all the timeframes correct for the school use throughout the year. September, October, we continue with the project. That's really the bulk of the schematic design phase work that we're doing. November, December, we finalize our package, submit it to the cost estimator, come back with a budget, which you will vote on. In January, February, we submit to the MSBA and we get board approval. And then March and April are the town meeting and the debt exclusion vote.
Can I ask a few questions on that?
Yes. Yep.
So by whenever, I guess December or whenever, will you have like what it looks like? We'll know what the outside is. We'll know what, I mean, maybe not the paint color, but yeah. Okay.
Yes. We'll be, we're beginning to do the exterior and massing piece in coordination with the interior work. And so we will have some exterior imagery that we'll be showing and presenting to you along the way.
Okay. And just, we don't want to go too deep, but so there's actually going to be a special town meeting like before then a ballot. So we're not going to do it during the course of the regular town meeting.
So that's the current thinking. We haven't finalized anything. And I know Nancy and Chris are on the call, and I don't think we've, sort of gone through this with them as well. But the way it works is that right now, as you know, the town vote is before the town elections are before the annual town meeting. So people would be voting on this without having an opportunity for really understanding what it is and getting into it. And we thought it would therefore be helpful if we called a special town meeting just on this project, because this will take a long time. And as we know, town meeting is long enough already. So we thought maybe we'd call a special town meeting before the April elections, maybe sometime in March, just so we can explain to people what is this project and answer any questions and have really the meeting be all about the school project and give it the amount of time that I think people will need to understand it. Okay. But again, this is sort of what we've been discussing. We haven't finalized anything yet.
Yeah, can I just comment? So that's the approach we did with the library, the main library, where we had a March town meeting and it went to the ballot in April. The other way to do it to get that same sequence would be bringing it to the regular town meeting and then having a special election afterwards.
Right.
So that's kind of the way we should look at it. When we've last spoke about this, we hadn't embarked on a COVID era environment. And the one thing that we're anticipating now is a fall town meeting, So the town charter provides for a November town meeting unless the select board votes to opt out. And our discussions to date have all been along the lines of having a fall town meeting. So stay tuned for that. And in terms of calling a special town meeting, that's in the hands of the select board to call that, unless the petitioners do. There are different approaches, but we can call a special town meeting.
And if we were to do March or April timeframe for the special town meeting, when do we need to have the warrant article to FinCom or to you or to the select board, or what's the timing for the warrant article?
Pam's on the call. She may be able to be more specific. We'd have to look at that. It depends on the dates. We get tied to the Finance Commission schedule and their ability to review any town meeting materials and make recommendations and then get it in the hands of the voters in advance of town meeting. So one of the reasons I suggested, the other option, I'm not saying that's my recommendation, but the going to the regular town meeting and then a ballot election is, the time pressure is pretty tight. If we wanted to do a March town meeting, it's sometime in January that things have to be really strong on that front. So Pam, do you want to make any comments on that?
Yes, we would have to get, I don't have that off the top of my head, but we'd have to get the timing for you, as well as there's timing for when the question that would go on the ballot has to be developed. So we would give you both those deadlines.
Okay, great.
Can I ask a question?
May I say something?
Sure. Wait, Giuseppe, I think, chimed in right before you, John, so hang on one sec.
I wanted to ask about the abutters. What involvement do they have in all of this? Because there are a whole bunch of, there's a group of homes that abut that property.
Yeah, so I think when you're pulling we're going to have to pull a special permit for this,
Yeah.
I assume, right? And I think as part of that review process, and I can't speak to it exactly because I don't know the zoning laws in Westwood, but I'm sure that there is notice and appeal periods that we need to get through.
Normal notification and that you would normally go through for any kind of.
I would think so, but I defer to anyone who knows more about Westwood. I haven't looked into that yet.
Does Chris know?
This is a school project, and the purview of the planning board is fairly limited. So there's not a special permit.
Okay, so it's just site plan review?
This is Chen. That I believe that zoning we are exempt because of the
Dover Amendment.
Dover
Right.
Amendment. But I think we are required to go through the permitting process because the parking the initial review was that the parking we're not going to be able to meet the number of parking spaces because of the way it's written. And so that we would need to have a exemption on that one.
So let us look into the details. I think I wasn't expecting this conversation this morning, but we have a lot of timelines that have to be evaluated. And it's been a long time since we talked about the sequencing of things. And given the current climate, I think it's something we have to really put a lot of thought into.
Okay, so maybe it probably makes sense now to start having those discussions, so we can talk offline about that. Maybe the working group will come up with a preliminary plan, and then we'll just bring it back to this group or whoever we need to, Chris or Nancy, and we'll go from there.
I'd just like to add one thing just in response to that. Typically on all of our projects, what we like to do is, obviously be good neighbors. And so, we will be reaching out not only to the larger Westwood community, but also to the neighborhood and, working closely with them to make sure that we address any of their concerns. And so I just want to make sure that, you're aware of that. That's something that we always do. So regardless of what is required by permit or not.
Yep.
Rob, I would suggest that this slide for any future use, that March, April, that we update that so it doesn't look like a commitment's been made. I just think we need to all discuss this. So,
Sure.
Yeah, why don't we can change that to spring.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
All right.
Anything else on this slide?
oh, I do have a question. The geothermal test well, and you mentioned notifying abutters. What is the expectation that they've been given? How impactful are these tests in terms of earth shaking and things like that?
So there's one well. It's going down about 600 feet. The actual well itself would probably take, or the well drilling itself is going to take about 2 to 3 days. They operate during the day, and there is some noise. There's no, it is not expected to provide vibration or earth shaking that would affect the neighbors.
Okay.
There is a very quiet, we're told, generator that will operate at night to help process some of the water through the processing of the drill.
And how extensive was neighborhood notification? I'm just thinking out loud, but in case people hear the noise and weren't part of the notification, it would probably be a good idea for us to let the police department know or other departments know in case they get calls of inquiry.
I don't have the exact list of neighbors that were sent to. I don't know, Chin, if you know.
Yeah, so I believe we only send out to the Laura Lane neighbors at this point, and there will be a second notice to go out once we know the definitive date. And certainly that we are planning, and at that point that notice would also go to the police, and then any other neighbor that you might that you think that will be appropriate, we can easily do that. But we told in the first letter that we said that there will be a second letter once we know once the day is firmed up.
Pam, Chris, is there somebody else like in town hall that should be notified so that it can be sent out to department heads or people to be aware?
Well, if we're notified, we can certainly forward that to the department heads.
Okay.
If we can get the information ahead of time, that would be helpful. So we can share with the department heads, public works, especially if there's, I just want to make sure that there's nothing going on from their perspective in addition to that. And
Okay.
when they get calls from the neighbors, know exactly what the project is about. But Mayor, if I could just go back to the comment I wanted to share earlier.
Sure, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
the
there.
town meeting. Oh, not a problem. So we are certainly talking about a fall town meeting, and we're also mindful of the health pandemic that we're in and what we had to do with the annual town meeting to move it outside. So just to be mindful, not knowing what's going to happen in a town meeting indoors will be the first, especially if we do have one in the fall. So if we're going to look to do something in the March, April timeframe, I just wanted to be mindful of that as well. That may be a little bit of a challenge logistically.
So that's a very good point, and maybe we look more toward the second option, which is having this at regular town meeting and hold a special election. But we can sort of play this one a little bit by ear. We probably don't have too much time, but let's sort of particularly see how the fall town meeting planning goes.
Could I I think it's a good idea to hold just a little, let's see how this all works through the fall, because having them within regular town meetings, especially when they're open town meetings like Westwood, adds a little level of logistical just to think about. So,
and it will also take up a lot of time to get through everything we need to get through, and
that's the big issue.
It'll turn that into a 3 to 4 hour town meeting, probably.
Right, or more. Yeah. Okay.
So Chin or Rob, can one of you send a copy of the abutters letter that we sent out? Can you send that to Chris? And then we'll also copy Chris on the second letter whenever that goes out.
Please send it to Pam as well.
Okay. Pam and Chris. Anyone else wants a copy? Anyone? Okay.
They'll take it from there.
You should probably send one to Sarah. She's the principal, so just so the teachers are in there all the time.
Can you guys just keep me up to date on dates and times when you're going to be there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right now, we still don't know because we have to have the permit from the Board of Health in hand in order to get the commitment from the contractor. So once we have that, we will let you know.
Great, thank you.
Great. Anything else on this schedule? No? Okay.
So, so the committee, we reviewed with the committee some of the differences between mass timber and steel framing, and had a pretty lengthy discussion on the benefits and considerations for these two options. The two options that we looked at was potentially just doing a partial timber framing, which would encompass, this entry canopy, the entry lobby, and centralized stair area, versus a comprehensive, which would also encompass the classroom wings. So generally speaking, the cost estimates would come in roughly $25 to $35 per square foot additional for the additional timber framing element. So that's a result of increased coordination needed for the mechanical system finishes. It's not a conventional construction type, so contractors typically aren't as familiar with this type of construction in the New England region. So all of that leads to additional cost. Another element that we talked about was the impact from acoustics. There's three elements. One is transmission, another is reflection and reverberation, and the third is from mechanical systems. Mechanical systems are fairly straightforward, but these other two require some additional measures that we would need to take in terms of adding baffles, adding layers of gypsum and kind of a buffer between each of the floor levels to address the transmission from footsteps and so on from one level to another. And then there's aesthetics, which in a timber framing type of construction, typically you have exposed elements, as opposed to most of these items being hidden behind an acoustical or drop-in lay-in ceiling. You've got exposed sprinkler piping and some exposed mechanical systems or ductwork and so forth. So it just has a slightly different appearance. In addition to the obvious the warmth of the wood that is a benefit, there are also these other elements that we just need to be aware of. So the decision points, as far as the steel, it does have a higher contribution to greenhouse gas emissions through its embodied carbon. However, it costs less than the timber framing. Contractors are familiar with it, so it's kind of standard construction. Versus the timber, where you have the environmental benefits of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions globally, and reducing water use, energy in manufacturing, and so on. The challenges are that it does cost more. You have this acoustics issue that we can certainly address and include, but it is a factor. And then the unfamiliarity with contractors, in this region, the concern of potential increase in costs even on bid day. So just in summary here, so the partial timber framing would add about $300,000, comprehensive and partial would add a total of 2.3, which has that combined into it. And then down below here, we indicate, what the reduction in embodied carbon would be associated with the structure itself, 7% for the partial and 75% and that's only associated with the structural elements of the overall project. So the recommendation was, and anybody that was on the committee can certainly chime in and add to this, but the overview was that it seemed to make sense to go with the steel framing because of the lower initial capital costs. It's more familiar to contractors, so there's less risk at bid day. And the general sense was that they would rather put money towards other sustainability measures that have a direct impact on energy savings, rather than the embodied carbon through the greenhouse gas emissions. Does anyone have any other, I don't know, Mia or anybody have any other comments on that?
Yeah, no, Rob, I think you summed it up well. I think the things we talked about were, I think the comprehensive one, everybody was very sort of wary of to begin with, just because of the cost. 2.3 million seemed like a lot when you were not getting, as he mentions here, a direct impact on energy savings. It really is just a materials consideration. You're just buying a material that has less carbon emission. And Tom Philbin made the point, he'd rather put that money, which is the third point on this slide, he'd rather put that 2.3 million or whatever money towards sustainability measures that actually impact operations and get us, to net zero. So I think the comprehensive one wasn't as attractive to most of the subcommittee members. The partial one we discussed a little more, that was $300,000, but ultimately we just found a number of more risks to timber than benefits. The risks were, and Rob has hit most of them, there's not too many experienced contractors in the Northeast, not very many people have done this, so we're likely to have a learning curve with the contractor on this process, which typically tends to add cost and time to projects, which is something I don't think any of us wanted to add. There were more mechanical and electrical and plumbing issues or costs because of the components and the exposed structure. So again, we'd probably see an increase in cost there. As Rob mentioned, acoustics are more challenging because you're trying to make it acoustically equivalent to a steel frame system, and that's just more expensive and can be a little bit challenging, particularly for people who aren't familiar with that process. We couldn't pre-approve subcontractors if we did a design bid build model, which we are looking at for the overall project. And that could be a problem, again, because not many contractors are familiar. If we can't pre-approve these subs, then we're sort of stuck with who the contractor chooses. And it's such a niche industry, particularly in the Northeast, that we were worried about that. And finally, I think Tim had actually pointed out to us that these cost estimates that we're getting are very preliminary. And they're much more of a guess as to some of the other cost estimates, which are much more well-known. We've gotten, I think, what we think are fairly reliable cost estimates for most of the things. But for this area, because it's a little bit unknown in the Northeast, I think we're a little bit less sure of the validity of the estimates. And so again, you could potentially wind up with something that we think would cost $300,000 and ends up costing much, much more. So for all of those reasons, we felt that even the partial timber framing was just too risky and particularly financially, but also from a construction perspective. And we're clearly in the COVID era, we're very conscious of cost. Every dollar that we spend, we need to be efficient, we need to be economical, we need to make sense. And so for that reason, the subcommittee is recommending a steel framing system. I will say there was a caveat to the recommendation, and that is that we're sort of reserving the right to look at even a more limited partial timber framing. And I think, and from what we understand, we can look at that later in the design process. We don't have to make that decision now. It can be a very, very limited amount of timber framing if we want that look, that design look, that aesthetic look. But that's not something we need to commit to now. So for now, we would say we are going with the steel framing system, and that, as I said, is the recommendation of the sustainability subcommittee. Anyone from the subcommittee care to add or correct me, or anyone have anything to say? And Brian, I know you were not at the subcommittee meeting, so if you have any thoughts you'd like to share now, we'd love to hear those as well.
Thanks, Maya. Well, that was a great summary, and Nancy had informed me of kind of what was talked about. So I tend to agree with all that. I think that's where it seemed like we were heading. So it would be nice. I like that option of having the architects having that flexibility to be able to use something, although maybe it's not timber, but I'm sure they're going to have great ideas of how to make the entry spaces look fantastic. So.
Yeah, and that is a conversation we had. I mean, we all sort of agreed that the look of timber framing, the aesthetic of it is beautiful. Well, I don't know if we all agreed, but it seems to be a majority of us. And that, keeping that in mind with when we're looking at interior finishes would be great. But in terms of having it be the structural element, I think that's where we all thought, steel framing system seemed to be the better choice for this particular project.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that the one about contractors being familiar with this or not can't be overstated, because
yes,
we wouldn't want to get into bind there. Also, and I just wanted to add on the finishes, pictures of natural wood look fantastic, but I'm sure the architects will have other aesthetic options to show us that might be equal to that as well. So.
Yep.
May I just want to add that you are capturing our opinions very, very well, and I think we were very unified with our recommendations.
Yep. I got that sense too. I don't want to speak for anybody, so if you're on the subcommittee and you don't agree, speak now. But I did get the sense that we all sort of came out to the same place.
And one other thing I would just add to what you said, Maya, is really a key aspect. There are other timber framing projects in New England, but the vast majority of them are private projects. So they have a private contractor. They're not dealing in a public bid process, and that is a critical piece to this discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think would really put us at a detriment in the bidding process.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Does anyone have any comments on timber framing? Any questions? Anything we didn't cover? No? Okay, I think we're going to move on to just, we're not really we are going to vote on whether or not to accept the subcommittee's recommendation today, but that's the extent of the vote we're taking for sustainability. But we do want to just give you a preview of the next sustainable issues that are coming up. So Rob's going to do that right now.
So the next piece that we discussed with the sustainability subcommittee was we are beginning this life cycle cost analysis. And basically our engineer is looking at multiple systems for heating and cooling. The baseline is a natural gas heating system. Tier 1 is going fossil fuel free with a water source heat pump. Supplemental
Rob?
Yes.
Could you just simply, for just in case that people are not familiar with the life cycle cost analysis, can you just simply give a one or two sentence?
Sure.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks. So this basically does a sort of due diligence analysis of comparing heating and cooling systems, so that everyone is aware of the annual operational costs as well as the maintenance costs over the lifespan of the project. So it's like 30, let's say they're 20 or 30 year period. And so our engineers will tally together all of the annual costs as well as the maintenance costs and operational costs of multiple systems and do an analysis to determine, okay, yes, we know what the upfront cost is, but here's the total cost of the life of the system. and so that you can make an informed decision on which system makes the most sense to move forward with. Does that kind of cover it? Jen?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So, the systems that we've been looking at is the natural gas heating system going to tier 1 as a water source heat pump with a supplemental electric boiler. It's a fossil fuel free. Tier 2 is going with the geothermal, so it's a ground source heat pump. And then all 3 of these utilize a dehumidification ventilation system with partial AC in the admin and the special ed spaces. So what we discussed was really the desire to add air conditioning as a sub-tier to each one of these. The addition of an additional tier, which would be the geothermal with the supplemental electric boiler in an effort to reduce the number of geothermal wells that would be needed. So that's kind of an analysis to say, hey, if we have a supplemental electric boiler that can handle the very coldest day, weeks of the year, that 2-week period in January when it's super cold, does that make sense to do that if we can reduce the number of wells and reduce our capital costs? So that's another tier that was added to that. And then there was some discussion about a window to wall ratio. The new energy code uses 22% window to wall as a baseline requirement. It's not a prescriptive requirement, so there is some flexibility in countering that in other ways. So we've targeted 25%. We are more comfortable with that percentage, and we'll continue to look at that. But there are a number of different ways of addressing and making sure that we've got plenty of natural light into the building, from incorporating skylights and clear story windows, and making sure that we have views out from the vast majority of spaces in the building. So
And Rob, if I can just add, the 25% target, it doesn't mean that each room only has 25% windows. It means your average is 25%. So you might have a higher window wall ratio in an area where you'd want more windows, or a lower in an area where you don't need as many windows. So you can focus on, if you wanted the cafeteria to be very light and bright, you would, use more windows there and less windows in maybe the gym or an area where, so that 25% is an average of the whole building. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, thank you. Yep. And then there are some walls, for example, in the classroom wing, where you might have one wall of the classroom with a large amount of glass, and then the other wall that's an end wall that has no glass on it, depending on how it's laid out. Mm-hmm. So, thank you. Any questions on this? This was the direction that we were given from this sustainability subcommittee.
And the reason we are asking for it to look at 100% AC to each, the baseline, the tier 1 and the tier 2, and I guess now tier 3, which is the geothermal with the supplemental electric boiler, is because we do anticipate that once this building is up and running, it probably will get a fair amount of summer use. I think right now, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Hanlon is used by the Westwood Recreation Department just from like 9 to 12 in the summer.
It's actually not used in the summer.
It's not used at all. Okay.
No.
But do you, I would expect that we may move some of the ESY programs there. We may be using the gym there more. So we're thinking that it could get a lot more use. And Sarah, I don't know if you have thoughts on that, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think the new building will get lots of use in the summer from all kinds of programs, and thus I would advocate for AC if we can do it.
Yeah. We are taking a trip out to see a couple schools that have the dehumidification ventilation process. I think Chin is in the process of setting up those visits now. We're hopefully going to go the first week of August. But we do, I think we all agreed that it was important to cost out 100% AC in the building, because we don't want to run into a situation where we've got this brand new building and it's too hot.
I should just clarify that the dehumidification is a partial AC process. It's just that the sort of design temperature is not done in the same way, and then so what you will have is because that by definition of ash rate is that if you say full AC is 75 degree, 50% humidity on the design day, which is climate data of the local condition, and right now that dehumidification ventilation system, the way it's designed, will get you somewhere on the design day or the worst day of the year is somewhere in the 80 degree, 50% humidity, which is we have found in the past that most people are okay with that, but you need to understand what that is. Right. So there is some AC no matter which option we choose. There's some cooling. That cooling is in the project. Just not just a subtleties of getting to 100% AC.
Yeah.
And something I just add is the summer use of the building for the extended school year program for students who have special education services. Some of their IEPs do require them to have air conditioning as part of the IEP document. So that's something to consider. We may need multiple spaces that have that.
Right. The special ed spaces are fully AC. And so that that is in the program.
Can I ask you a question about servicing the geothermal heating system? How easy is it to get service for geothermal heating currently?
So we are going to talk about the pluses and minuses of all of the systems in our next sustainability subcommittee meeting. And I will say that out of the three systems, the geothermal system is actually the least amount of maintenance.
But just on Sarah's point, if I understand, I think the distinction, Shin, might be the difference. If I'm right now, the air conditioning that we're putting in to special eds is for the regular school year, but if we put the summer program, which the ESY is, that might be additional classrooms. If I understand right, that might be additional classrooms beyond what we normally use. Is that correct?
So it would be good that if we know how many classrooms would require that, then we can make the accommodation right now.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've got 100% AC in the special education classrooms that are designated in the building.
Right. I think we're just worried that if we need more classrooms than the designated ones, and we sort of lock ourselves into that now and say, oh, we need 3 more classrooms, and then it turns out that actually the ESY program needs 5 more classrooms, then, so, and, there's other programs in there too that, anyway, but this is all for another week.
Yes.
Trying to get us out early.
My ESY this year has spread out all over the place because of what's going on. So for us not to do the whole building and give us the flexibility to move classrooms around depending on what we need would be a mistake.
Yep. And I tend to agree with you. Right, which is why we are looking at it.
Sorry, anything else on this before we move on? Okay. So that's it for our slides. The next step, as I mentioned, in August 18th, the Sustainability Subcommittee will meet again, go over the pluses and minuses of each of the heating and cooling systems, go over life cycle cost analysis, and then the August 25th School Building Committee meeting will focus on a vote on which of those systems to move forward with.
Great. Any final questions on sustainability? Nope. Okay. I am going to move into the action items. So the first thing is the approval of the Sustainability Subcommittee's recommendation for timber framing, and I'm going to read it to you so that we are all on the same page. So the recommendation from the Sustainability Committee is that we not move forward with either partial or full timber frame construction and instead move to steel framing construction, but we reserve the right to look at a more limited partial timber frame during schematic design. Can I have a motion to approve that recommendation?
This is a motion to approve the recommendation.
Yeah.
Second.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I will do a roll call. Ken Aries,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Allison's not here, Chris,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
John Cummings,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Abby's not here, Nancy,
Yes.
Josepha, Josepha, I think you're on mute.
No, yes.
Okay, thanks. Carol Lewis,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Emily's not here, Amanda? Oh, she may have had to, did she have to jump? Okay. And Kate?
Yes.
And Maya says yes, so motion is carried. Okay, I now need a motion to approve the invoices for June. These are invoices totaling $67,220. They consist of an invoice from Compass Project Management for $18,670 and one from Doran Whittier for $48,550. Can I get a motion to approve these invoices?
Second.
All right, Ken,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Josepha,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
and Maya says yes, motion is carried. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the June 19th, 2020 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. I'll go into the roll call. Ken,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Josepha,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Kate, and Maya is a yes, motion is carried. And finally, can I get a motion to accept the June 2nd, 2020 minutes of the Sustainability Subcommittee?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Nope. Ken,
Yes.
Brian?
I wasn't there, so I'll abstain, but I agree with the outcome.
Okay, thank you. Chris,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Josepha,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. And Maya says yes, motion is carried. All right, is there any new business? No? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Ken,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes, and thanks everyone for all the information.
thanks, Brian. Chris,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
John,
Yes, and stay healthy.
Charlie,
Yes.
Pam,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Josepha,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes.
Michelle,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
and Kate.
Yes.
And May is a yes. Motion is carried. We are adjourned.